good. Headband okay. This like weird spot that's making me look like I have a bald spot, but I don't. It's just my hairline pushed over. When I do headbands, I tend to wear them kind of a little bit closer to my forehead, but I was trying not to do the whole, aging heavy metal rocker style. You know who I'm talking about. So yeah, here is part 3 of the Nobel Peace Prize series. And if you're new to the channel and you came over here and you're like, God, is this all she talks about? Is just heavy stuff, politics, and all that kind of stuff? No, I don't really have like a set topic I talk about on this channel. I just have so many books in my collection that pretty much I really just put videos together as I put enough books in a stack with a cohesive theme that makes sense for a video, and that could be on anything. So sometimes it'll be more serious stuff like, politics and like Nobel Peace Prize and history, things like that. And then other times I'll do more lighthearted stuff like, paranormal romance, or I know I still have to do the baseball video that is coming. So yeah, it just depends. I read a little bit of everything. But one of the pushes for me to come back to YouTube is that I'm actually in the process of kind of letting go of a lot of my library. It's not the easiest thing for me to do, but it's something that I decided just kind of needed to be done. I have more that I need or that I'm going to get to, and like I mentioned with my update video, with some of the stuff I'm working through with trying to get my brain health back, I just can't read at the same level that I used to. So a lot of this is stuff that I have read in the past that I intended to do videos for back in the day, and then it just sat on my work desk or one of my work desks in my office, and just sort of sat in limbo. So a lot of this stuff I'm revisiting and making videos out of so that I can move them out and let other people have them. So a lot of the books that you see coming up in videos in the future, a lot of those are going directly into the shop, which is linked below. So anyway, the third and final one in this Nobel Peace Prize series, at least for now, I don't have any more planned in the near future, is this Banker to the Poor. This is the story of Muhammad Yunus. And this is a guy that put together a bank for impoverished people in Bangladesh. So getting into his story, this probably won't take quite as long as the Wangari video did. There was a lot to cover, or that I wanted to cover in the Wangari video. Yunus's story is a little bit more straightforward. It's not quite as meandering, but he does accomplish a lot in his story that I kind of wanted to just talk about a little bit. So just a little bit of background on Muhammad before we get into the main thing that got him the Nobel Peace Prize. So if I'm looking down, it's because I have my notes here. Okay, so Muhammad Yunus, he starts out being born, like most of us, but he's born in Pakistan and has a pretty standard childhood from what it seems like in this book. They don't spend a lot of time on his early childhood. They talk about it a little bit, but they pretty much just sort of blow through that straight into his college years. So when he gets to college, gets through college, gets his basic degree, like his bachelor's degree, and when he comes out of that, his first job out of college is I know, shocker, he gets a job teaching economics. I know, a guy to go on and start a bank. So he starts this job teaching economics to incoming college students. And at the same time, or around the same time, he also gets this idea to start this company on the side. I think it was around the same time he was teaching economics, but it was this, I think it was a packaging and painting company that you could hire out. Well, he had to go to the bank to get a business loan to get the funds to get this going. And when he went to do the loan, his father was really insistent that he pay the loan back as early as possible. So the whole process of him going through that, getting the business loan for the first time, and his father's pressure on him to pay the loan back early, that probably put in the initial seeds for what he was going to do with Grameen Bank. But for the most part, he's doing the economics thing for a while. He gets to a point where he decides he wants to extend his education. So he wants to go back to college and pursue a PhD. Well, the PhD comes later, obviously. He goes through graduate school, gets his master's, and the PhD. You guys know how college works. So he gets this opportunity to go extend his education in the States, going to colleges there. So this was through the 1960s, and he ends up getting his PhD, and then as he's finishing up over there, territorial unrest sort of happens between Bangladesh and Pakistan. Bangladesh, the nation of Bangladesh, comes out and they say that they as a people want their independence, and Pakistan is uncomfortable with that. Pakistani army goes and makes this big push to try to suppress the people pushing for Bangladesh's independence. And it gets pretty dark pretty quickly. And at this point, Yunus is still in the United States, but he's hearing about all this, and there's quite a few Bengali American people that are also watching this on the news. And everybody is really disturbed by this because it's hard for people to get back over there easily, and they're worried about their families. And Yunus becomes so upset with the way that Pakistan is handling the situation, or not handling it, or handling it badly, that he ends up siding with the people of Bangladesh, even though he was originally born in Pakistan. And so he and his college friends get together and they decide they need to put some programs together, and it takes a while for them to figure out what they're going to do exactly. There's some time where they're just trying to figure out, we want to help but we don't know what to do. So they get together and they eventually come up with a few different committees they can put together where they are. And so one of them, you can read more about this in the written review I wrote down below. I went into a little bit more detail. This video is going to be a little bit more generalized just for the sake of time. But one of the groups they put together was the Bangladesh Defense League, which I thought was interesting, and they said it was headed by Dr. R.F. Khan, who is the Bengali American architect who designed the Sears Tower. This is carrying on, and starting into the 1970s, Pakistan has started resorting to genocide during all this conflict, and obviously that's really problematic and disturbing for Yunus and his friends trying to do all these things with the committee. The beginning of the 1970s, Bangladesh finally wins its independence, but at the cost of 3 million dead, and I think 10 million, a further 10 million more displaced. So Yunus is in the States. He decides he needs to go back to Bangladesh and help with the rebuilding efforts of the country. So he goes back to work as a professor over there, trying to do what he can to help his local communities. When you're reading about this portion in Yunus's life, you notice there's a theme already developing, because he's still pretty young at this point, but there's a theme already developing that he's making it a point to go and make places better wherever he can, just a little bit, which I could appreciate because that was something that I was raised with in our family. It was something that was really pushed, that even if you don't have a lot, financially, if you don't have a lot of means to your name, there's typically something you can always do, even on a small scale, to make your little portion of the world that much better, even if it's just being nice to people. That in itself these days is pretty rare. There are a lot of people that are doing that sort of fake nice, where they'll do something nice for you, but it's for like an Instagram like or something. But finding genuinely nice people who genuinely care about you and honestly want to see you succeed in life and have your come up and all of that, that's a little bit more rare for people to be genuine with that. But that is something you can do when you don't have even much money to your name. You can go and just be a good person to somebody, and you'd be surprised how far that can take somebody just to genuinely give a shit about another human being. So there's this theme in his life where he's just, whatever he can think of, he's just trying to better areas little by little. And one of the things he starts with is that at his college, when he's given the opportunity to become a department chair, he actually gives his office up so that it can be turned into a teacher's lounge, because he noticed that teachers didn't have anywhere to rest in between classes. He's going in and he's developing programs already before he's even started this bank thing that he's going to become well known for. He's already trying to do what he can to put together resources to create programs that fight famine in the area. The big thing that happened, the big spark that ends up rearranging his life basically, is he has this one conversation with this 22-year-old mother named Sophia Begum, I think it is, and I forget in the book how they say he came across her. Somebody introduced her to him, and he discovers that she's living this life where she's a single mom, I think, in the story, and she has this business that she's trying to live off of, where she makes bamboo stools. But she's in this situation where she had to go to money lenders to get the money to fund her business and buy supplies and all that. And the money lenders' fees for funding her business are so high that it only leaves her with about 2 cents a day to feed her and her child. 2 cents a day. And Yunus is just, but she's doing the best she can with it. She doesn't know what else to do, and Yunus feels so bad for her that he goes to his research assistant and he said, look, go around this area, get me a list of names of anyone in this area who has a loan agreement like she does, where, you know, the high fees and everything. And it takes about a week, and then his research assistant comes back, and his research assistant has the names of 42 craftspeople who are under similar loan programs with these money lenders. Collectively, all of their loans together, you know what they came to? $27. These people are having to live basically at starvation point for a collective $27. How many of us go to Target or Walmart or wherever and just blow that, not even think about it, multiple times a week? So Yunus, you know, he said, yeah, this is an issue. This is not cool. So he wants to help, but he's not quite sure where to start, because it's never, I mean, even in the States, it's never easy to take on something as big as like national bank corporations. They're usually pretty established, massive conglomerates that you have to consider, and they're used to being that way. They're used to getting their way. They're used to everybody sort of being like, well, it's the bank, what are we gonna do? So it takes him a while, but he starts to put together this program where he's going to challenge the banking system. And the banking system, the way it was at that point, was that, another shock, he said it wasn't really charitable to poor people in the area, which, it's not a surprise. Banks typically aren't. That's why, when you at the poverty line, it's always a little bit of a dreaded feeling to go in and try to get a loan. But there was also this process of the banks tended to use middleman lenders that acted as sort of liaison officers between the bank and what they called, I think, what were they calling the poor people? They had some name for them. Financial untouchables. So when Yunus realizes that this lower class is so meagerly represented, but has such big dreams that they want to accomplish and just need a little bit of help, he decides to create the Grameen Bank. And it's not an overnight thing. He doesn't just go and rent a building out and say, oh, this is the bank now. It's little by little. A lot of it is done in like maybe a small local office where you're kind of working off of petty cash almost, and trying to figure out these systems as you go. Figuring out this whole new way of banking took him years to really get the wrinkles out of. But when he starts, and I guess I should explain, Grameen Bank, the word Grameen, it translates to either, depending on who you talk to, it translates to either rural or village. They explain in the book. But he wants to figure out a system to help people with this emotional kind of paralysis that he sees people develop, because another thing with the larger banks is whenever they had loans, and there's a lot of banks that still do this now, you take out loans and they expect you to pay these massive lump sums in, however, monthly, quarterly amounts, whatever, all at once, to pay it off quickly so they can get their money back. And people would kind of freak out about that because they need the money, but also it is stressful sometimes when you're trying to get something off the ground to also have to juggle this loan payment. So instead of having that emotional paralysis that comes around the huge lump sums, he decided he was going to create a system where people could come in every day and just pay a little bit. And on top of that, he created these little sort of support programs within the bank once he got enough members together to really make a sizable group of people. He asked members to enroll in a support group where you were put together with other people that had taken loans out of the bank. And the idea of this, just to start with a support group, was one, it takes down the shame level of, or if you happen to feel shame, it diminishes that a little bit. If you're around a bunch of other people who are in your same situation, it's I guess it's kind of like the idea of going to AA meetings or something. It's hard to feel overwhelmingly bad about yourself when you're in a whole room of people who have been in your situation. You go into a room, you automatically have that support system. Or so I imagine. I mean, I haven't gone to AA meetings. I've had to sit through I forget the term for the families of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a different branch for that. I've experienced that, but not Alcoholics Anonymous myself. But I've had friends that have gone through Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's the gist I get, is that you're going into a place where, people have been where you're at, so there's a diminished sense of shame right off the bat. So there's that, but then there's also, you get into this group and he's hoping that when you get around people, there's going to be not only a sense of accountability, because again, you're around people who are all in the same boat as you, so everybody's going to be like, pay your damn bills. But there's also going to be a little bit of a sense of competition, because it just happens naturally, usually, when you get a large number of people together. Yeah, but a lot of people, when they get together, you can't help but feel that just a little bit, I'm going to do a little bit better than you. Which he said, great, be competitive, pay your bills. So that was kind of the idea behind that. And then he also designed this group system where when people needed loans within a community, he would put together people in groups of 5, and he would start and say, okay, the first 2 people get the loan amounts they want, and if these 2 people can manage to pay their loans steadily, reliably, for about 6 weeks, the next 2 people can have their loans, and so on and so forth. So again, that was creating this community where your neighbors held you accountable. So it protects him on the back end too. And then on top of that, to even qualify for the loan at all, he made it so that anyone asking for money had to go through a 7-day program where you were taught all of the banking policies and then asked to do an oral exam at the very end to see what you learned, and you had to pass the oral exam in order to get the money. And the point of all of these things put together was that he was hoping that it was going to make make it a little bit, he didn't want to make it overly complicated, but he wanted to make it a little bit challenging for people to get these loans, just to sort of weed out the people that were just going to rush in for an easy handout. He wanted the people that were honestly needing the money, were willing to work for it, put the sweat equity into paying it back, all that kind of stuff. Because he tells these stories where he would see people that would be so stressed out and have such anxiety, and they're going to church and they're lighting candles and crying over the candles, and you hear them say these prayers for money as little as $50 to get their family out of some financial bind. And he said, you know, those are the people he wanted to help. He didn't want people that were just going to be like, well, if you're giving away money. So as he's working this out, he goes to the Ministry of Finance, explains to them what he wants to do, and it's sort of an uphill battle to get them to sign off on it, because their initial reaction is like, you're a professor, not a banker, what the hell do you know? But he keeps at it, and he keeps showing them, hey, no, this is really working out though. These loans are getting paid back at a pretty nice rate. So he's starting to win them over a little bit, but then he brings in this other thing he wants to try, where he says, I want the bank to be 100% owned by the borrowers. And naturally the Ministry of Finance was like, what? No, you don't want the government involved at all? He's like, no, not really. And he's like, yeah, no, we're not going to sign off on that. So he has a long back and forth with them, eventually hits a point of compromise where I think it's 93%. Yeah, he eventually gets the Ministry of Finance to sign off on the bank being 93% owned by the borrowers. So there's still that 7% government interference or fingers in the pot, but what are you gonna do? But he said, you know what, it's better than nothing. It gets us off the ground and running. We'll take it. While he's doing all this hoop jumping with the Ministry of Finance, he's looking at all the research, you know, trying to present his case and everything, and he discovers an unexpected sort of side effect, I guess you'd call it, of his new banking system he's been trying to introduce. Because one of the things that he also was selling about Grameen Bank is he wanted to make the gender bias not a thing anymore. He had seen with a lot of banks that whenever women tried to go in for loans, even if they were financially dependent, even if they made more money than their husband, even if they didn't have a husband, even if they were paying their own way, a lot of the banks said, you need to bring a man in to sign off on this, or we're not giving you the money, regardless of what the situation was with her financially. Didn't care. They wanted a man's signature. And Yunus came back and said, well, that's jacked. There are plenty of skilled women that have really great ideas that, you know, just need financial backing, that if you just support them, they could really put great things out into the world. And the banks were like, yeah, but they got boobs though. So Yunus wanted to do away with all that. He said, you know, as long as you're doing all the programs, you're doing the work, I don't care what you identify as. And it ends up that as more and more women are signing up for these loans, the women in the area are starting to feel more and more empowered, finally. They don't feel like they have to be under anyone's thumb anymore. They can put their ideas forth and create things. And the unexpected side effect of that was that there were a lot of women that were actually deciding not to have as many kids. The baby boom was sort of petering out a little bit for a while, because there weren't these women that were thinking that, you know, well, my husband knocked me up, so here we go again. They were actually going back and saying, hey, why don't we just worry about the kids we can comfortably afford and call it a day? Or maybe not have kids. Maybe we could find success with not have kids too. And so women were suddenly having choices with what they could do with their lives, and they could be free to pursue other things. And so there wasn't this crushing population explosion that was hitting the country for the first time in years. And another thing he found out as he was finding this information was that it had to do with the city infrastructure itself. He was discovering that there was a lot of messed up funding practices within like the Department of Ministry, between like, you know, I don't know what the term would be equivalent over there, but like what we here would call like city council, things like that. There was just a lot of weird handling of the money and just bad financing and things like that. So he was able to go in and sort of rework some of that and bring in new ideas to better finance things that his area needed, as far as like better roads and getting construction programs off the ground, getting construction programs completed, making areas safer to drive through and walk through, and all these things. And this was all happening as sort of a trickle-down effect from just him introducing this new way of putting out money into the world. So in here he says, governments and population agencies are not putting nearly as much effort into changing the quality of life of the poor as they put into some of their scare tactics, such as pressuring illiterate men and women to physically remove their ability to procreate. UN studies conducted in more than 40 developing countries show that the birth rate falls as women gain equality. The reasons for this are numerous. Education delays marriage and procreation, and better educated women are more likely to use contraceptives and more likely to earn a livelihood. I believe that income earning opportunities that empower poor women and bring them into organizational folds will have more impact on curbing population growth than the current system of encouraging family planning practices through intimidation tactics. Family planning should be left to the family. The Grameen Bank is often cited in population discussions because the adoption of family planning measures among Grameen families is twice the national rate of Bangladesh. During the Cairo Population Conference of September 1994, it is also noted that the birth rate among Grameen families is significantly lower than the national average. Once they have increased their incomes through self-employment, Grameen borrowers show remarkable determination to have fewer children, educate the ones they have, and participate actively in our democracy. If microcredit can help bring family planning awareness to families, why do not governmental and international agencies, which are so concerned about population growth, promote microcredit more actively than they do? Could it be because microcredit runs as a profit-oriented business? Are there vested interests in the current population programs? I believe that the emphasis on curbing population growth diverts attention away from the more vital issue of pursuing policies that allow the population to take care of itself. The sooner we rearrange our priorities, the better it will be for all people on the planet, and now and in the future. So as he's getting all of this set up, and he's getting more involved in city planning and helping families do, better family planning and all that kind of stuff, he's starting to incorporate all these little things into the Grameen Bank program and developing new systems and programs for people to sign up for within the Grameen Bank organization. While he's doing all this, it's starting to go into the 1980s, and the Clintons invite Yunus to come to the United States and set up a similar or an extended branch of Grameen Bank in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, but they end up calling it the Good Faith Fund. But essentially they're bringing the same ideas over here and helping the poor in Arkansas and seeing how that works out. So he's trying to get that going. This guy is very busy between like I would say between the 60s and the 90s. This guy was trucking all over the place. So he's getting that set up over there, and then government of Bangladesh calls him back and says, okay, we got a new project for you we need some help with. There was this section of land in India where there was like 1,000 or over 1,000 ponds that dated back to the Pala dynasty. I think it was Pala dynasty. Yeah, also known as the Pala Empire. I think that this is roughly dates back to like 9th century India, I think. So they had all these ponds still out there, but they, 9th century, by this point they had really filled up with silt and a lot of them were dried out and stuff. There was this idea years before it was presented to Yunus to turn these around and make them into viable fisheries again, but the funding never really got off the ground. There was a lot of shady government interference for some reason. It was always held up for something. And so some people reached out to Yunus and said, look, if you and your bank want to help fund this, do you want to head up this project and turn it around? And it took a little bit of convincing, but Yunus agrees to do it with a bunch of conditions, which they talk about in the book. And it takes him a while. He puts together a pretty solid crew of guys to help rebuild these ponds, drag them out of the silt and all of that, put the fish back in, all that kind of stuff. And eventually they're able to revitalize, I think they said 808 of the 1,000 ponds, and turn them back into usable fisheries, which, as he's, Yunus doing his Yunus thing, he finds another way of, once again, bringing funding and food back into an impoverished area of his community. He's still sort of overseeing all of these different projects going on that he started, and then he's sort of like, doing the managerial thing where he pops in now and then and says, hey, how's it going? So by the time he gets to the 1990s, you would think that, he'd be like, hey, I've done pretty good. I could probably chill for a little bit, right? No, 90s kept him pretty busy too. So by the time he gets to the 1990s, I forget how it comes about, but he gets this idea to start a textile company that brings more jobs to the area. And then somehow he gets talked into going into the cell phone business. He creates an affordable cell phone company, cell phone provider company for people in poorer areas of Bangladesh. But then when he does this, he finds out, oh wait, we've run into a problem, because people are going to buy these cell phones, but then they go out into the rural areas where there aren't really that many pockets of service, so they're going to have these cell phones that are going to be useless bricks. So then he has to create a renewable energy program to provide reliable electricity to the people so that they can have service in their areas, so that they can buy cell phones and still use them when they go out into the sticks. And then on top of that, he's thinking, okay, well, since we have cell phones and people getting reliable power and everything, obviously we're going to need internet out there at some point. So then he has to put together an internet provider service. So, and this is all coming from a guy who just started as an economics professor, and he keeps going into all of these places trying to get funding and backers and everything, and he's just it feels like he goes into a lot of places just sort of winging it, and then somehow comes out with a success just from sheer enthusiasm and determination. But the thing that really blew me away is that towards the end of the 90s, he comes up with, on top of all of this other stuff, he designs a health care program to incorporate into the Grameen Bank system. And so he comes out, and this just, looking at the way healthcare is in the States, how expensive it is, even if you have a good plan, this blows me away that he's able to pull this off in the 90s. So he designs this healthcare program where it's $3 a year, the whole year, not per person, per family. $3 for your whole ass family for the whole year. It's $5 if you're not in the Grameen family system, but spring an extra $2 considering what a lot of my healthcare costs. Now I think I could do $5. And then when I was reading this, I could not get over the copay. He figures out a way to make the copay for each doctor visit less than 3 cents. My brain can't even wrap around that. I think the cheapest copay I have on my plan is like $20. That's just to go see my primary for like 10-15 minutes or whatever. like all my specialists are, my specialists can run anywhere from 40 to 80 bucks depending on who I'm seeing per visit. But I'm just thinking about like all the doctors I have to go to, thinking like if I could just throw down 3 cents every time I had to go talk to them, because the way it is now, like when I go to my primary now, my primary is very like my new doctor that I have, she is very referral happy, which I don't mind. Like I like that she's proactive about trying to find stuff, but it's I don't have a doctor's salary. So whenever she says, okay, I want you to go see this person now, in my brain I'm thinking like I have like that little calculator with the old, I get this image of like the old style calculator that has the like calculating tape going through it and just like overflowing onto the floor. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just go see another specialist. Yeah, cool. But if I could do all that and just like throw down 3 cents at a time and be like, okay, cool, thanks, it's been fun, that would be amazing. The book was written a little while ago, 2003. So I'm not sure what the rate is now. It could be quite a bit higher, but like just the fact that he was able to start with this in the 90s is just insane. There's a little bit in here that explains that. Talking about all these fees and stuff, I forgot there was a part in here I was going to mention. There's a little paragraph that I thought was interesting where he talks about the borrowers, and going back a little bit to the, I'm going to get into the healthcare thing, but going back just a little bit when he's talking about in the 1990s, how he was coming up with all these programs and trying to do whatever he could to make it a little bit more comfortable for people in their lives. And he sits down with his crew at the bank and he has a conversation about, okay, what do we consider poverty free? We want to make the area poverty free. How can we do that? How do we define that? To encourage successful borrowers, Grameen started a variety of new loan programs in the 1990s. These included seasonal loans for borrowers who were sharecroppers or who had bought some land since joining Grameen. Also established a tube well loan program for borrowers who needed 50 to 100 to sink into a hand-powered well to access safe drinking water. Our new family loan program enabled borrowers to take out loans for family members' income-generating projects. And our equipment and cattle leasing programs allowed borrowers to slowly purchase costly equipment and livestock through a lease-to-own agreement with us. Borrowers used this program to buy such diverse items as video cameras to record the weddings of upper-class people, power tillers, irrigation pumps for cultivation, baby taxis for transportation services, rice mills, photocopy machines, small herds of better-bred cattle, and much, much more. Grameen borrowers were constantly branching out into new creative money-making schemes, and we wanted to help them leave the poverty line so far behind that their young children would barely remember what it was like to be poor. Though we wanted to encourage our most successful borrowers to take out bigger and bigger loans, we did not abandon those who were still starting the struggle against poverty. We declared a new goal. We wanted to make every Grameen branch poverty-free within an allotted period of time. How did we define poverty-free? After interviewing many borrowers about what a poverty-free life meant to them, we developed a set of 10 indicators that our staff and outside evaluators could use to measure whether a family in rural Bangladesh lived a poverty-free life. Now this is what kind of surprised me, because there are plenty of areas in the states today where we don't even have these indicators in our communities here, even now. These indicators that they came up with, these 10 determining factors that they decided would help deem you poverty free in Bangladesh, were number 1, having a house with a tin roof. Number 2, having beds or cots for all members of the family. Number 3, having access to safe drinking water. Number 4, having access to a sanitary latrine. Number 5, having all school-age children attending school. Number 6, having sufficient warm clothing for the winter. Number 7, having mosquito nets. Number 8, having a home vegetable garden. Number 9, having no food shortages, even during the most difficult times of a very difficult year. And number 10, having sufficient income opportunities for all members of the family, all adult members of the family. Getting into child labor law. We will be monitoring these criteria on our own and inviting local and international researchers to help us track our successes and setbacks as we head towards our goal of a poverty-free Bangladesh. The healthcare thing, he says, if we could persuade our borrowers to take the money they give to traditional healers and give it instead to a Grameen-sponsored healthcare program, we might provide them with modern and effective healthcare services for the same amount of money. That process has begun. We are now trying to make healthcare available to all members of Grameen families and to all villagers who are not Grameen borrowers on a self-financing cost recovery basis. We ask our borrowers to pay a fixed amount of $3 per family per year as a premium to a health insurance program. Each time they see a doctor, borrowers must pay a nominal amount of less than 3 cents. Laboratory services and medication are available at a discount. The Grameen Health Program is also operating eye camps in the villages where trained doctors perform, among other services, intraocular lens implantation for cataract patients. Cost of the operation is only 1,000 taka, which is about US $20. Just getting cataract surgery for 20 bucks. I mean, if you tried to say that here, he would be like, well, did you go to one of those discount places? But the fact that he's trying to bring that into impoverished communities so that, you know, people can get their eyesight back is just, it's amazing. So he's working on all these things, and then in 2006 is when they award him the Nobel Peace Prize. So he ends up being the first person from Bangladesh to do this. And he ends up using the prize money, when I looked it up, it said he ended up using the prize money to develop Science and Technology University, develop a food service program for the poor, and also fund a low-cost eye hospital. So he ended up putting it right back into his community anyway. There are also things he talks about in here about setting up retirement programs for the bank members, and also he has systems set in place where if someone happens to die before they can pay off their loan, he has a system for that where the loan will be taken care of one way or another, and also he helps out the family of the person who took out the loan. So yeah, that's basically it. I mean, if you're into finance or just, you know, humanitarian efforts, that kind of thing, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. It's not the most fascinating read, but it had some pretty good points in it. I'm just blown away with what he was able to pull off with starting with not a lot. It's kind of inspiring. So I'm going to close this out with a little, kind of like I did with the Wangari video, where I'll give you a few little factoids about Grameen Bank, what they were able to accomplish post early 2000s, I guess. And we will call this topic a wrap, I guess. So thanks for watching, and we will talk soon. Bye, guys.